見せてくれよ最強を終わりだ
見切った。
食らいやがれサンゲスメラスポテンティアティ風剣光線の嵐お前たちの仕事は戦闘だ
私の中に自分を見て
秘密を抱えて死ね
私には使命がある。
俺はここじゃ終われない
世界は君を中心に回り始める。
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are talking about Reynatis. And for those of you who watch Retro Rebound often, you may be thinking to yourselves, Maddie, the CRT's over there. What's going on, brother? Well, there's this thing I like to call the retro respect. When I'm at the CRT, it's because I respect what's going on with the game, and I've got something to say. But there are just some games out there, and we've only done this one other time, that are so poorly made, so unaware of the many pitfalls within the game, that it's extremely frustrating to play, and I, as a player, feel disrespected, and so I don't sit up at the CRT. I know I'm cutting real deep here. But ladies and gentlemen, as someone who's not just a flyby JRPG player, but does like FuRyu's games, I personally was looking forward to Reynatis. For those who don't know about FuRyu, I think their backstory is really important to get into. Many folks know them as a team that does imitation-style JRPGs, whether it be the Caligula Effect, which is very much clearly inspired by Persona, but not quite as good, or Monarch, or Reynatis, which is clearly inspired by Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and The World Ends With You, but definitely not as good. This is a company that speaks to a lot of people because they're easy to root for since they have young developers getting director positions and just pursuing these games with passion because they're inspired by the GOATs in JRPGs and want to go ahead and make their own. And as someone who's played previous FuRyu games, I did like the Caligula Effect 1 and 2. Caligula Effect 1 being my favorite out of everything FuRyu has made, but Reynatis is a game that just feels like something was deeply wrong here. And as I did more research on the title outside of my review, it started to make more sense. This game is directed by Takumi Isobe, who says he very much loves Square Enix and his praised series like Kingdom Hearts, The World Ends With You, and Final Fantasy as being formative RPGs for him. And it's that type of thing that makes you want to root for them. But then it's not also like, hey, these Japanese developers are being nice to each other. Square Enix actually struck a deal with FuRyu, and there is Neo, The World Ends With You content in the game. But there's also the very telling admission in this interview where the director said he proposed 106 ideas before landing on Reynatis, and that he actually knew nothing about game development in his first year at the company. Now, no doubt this will be used as a dunk, but there are plenty of first-time developers who are doing an excellent job in the games industry. Some have to learn in a more difficult way than others, unfortunately, and this is one of those cases where Reynatis checks a lot of boxes, but doesn't really do anything right, and you can feel the inexperience and the lack of direction in this game. There are great creative choices. I think the world ideas are exciting and interesting, but just not well realized. I think they pick talent in a great way. It's cool to see The World Ends With You getting a collab in this game, and it's also great to hear the wonderful music of Yoko Shimamura here, which is absolutely a selling point unto itself. I love her music from Kingdom Hearts. It's incredible in this game, and it definitely is the one positive element I will point out early on. But otherwise, I don't know how else to put it, and I don't want to be mean because it is a new developer, but Reynatis isn't good at all, in my opinion. I don't really have anything positive to say about it, and it was very difficult for me to get to the finish line for this game. I put 15 hours in, got to about chapter 20, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is so frustrating, and I know I'm gonna be way more mean than I have to be. I'm just gonna stop myself here. And as a fan of FuRyu's games, this was a serious letdown. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into what we do at Retro Rebound, normally at the CRT back there, then consider subscribing. The first thing I have to talk about is what you recognize right away. It's the visuals. There's no way I can talk about anything else in this game if I don't address the visuals, because it's the first thing you see, and not in a plucky Squire level, ooh, that's very charming and different, in a, oh my God, this is low budget, I guess, but like even lower than low budget. What happened here? And I have the same question you do, my friends. I do have bigger problems in this, but since it's the first thing you see, I need to get into it. And I think this is where you see something is just deeply, deeply wrong with the game, because it's not even acceptably bad, where you can see the game is trading off to accomplish something else that's more impressive, from the facial animations to the texture quality and the lighting. I mean, everything is horrendous and ripped out of the PS2 era, and I don't mean that in a charming way, because we have seen a multitude of, say, PS1 style survival horror games storm back, like Conscript or Signalis, and those games managed to honor the consoles that inspired them without playing so strictly, if you will, by their visual rulebook. But Reynatis is distractingly ugly everywhere. And it also is more frustrating because it feels downright unoriginal compared to FuRyu's previous games, where there's this shot of Nishijima looking at her phone, and the logo on the phone is practically a ripoff of the Somnium Files logo. I was very shocked to see this. You know, I'm fine with FuRyu and any creative out there wearing the inspiration on their sleeves. Like, for example, in this game, there's like a little Kingdom Hearts nod for fans out there that I think they'll kind of appreciate, which is when your health is low, there's a little siren that goes off. And many of us know that very awful yet iconic soundscape in Kingdom Hearts, and when you're about to die. And so this game has it. I can appreciate creative nods like that, like a little tip of the cap. And definitely, I don't even mind more direct lifts, but this is like an artistic lift that just seems so eerily similar that it's difficult to respect what they're trying to accomplish here. And this is a nitpick, but I do get a kick out of the fact that somehow both Adidas and Burger King have made their ways into the world of Reynatis. Obviously, this is supposed to be a recreation of modern Shibuya, Tokyo, if you couldn't tell, but it was just so funny to me to see these big brands in here, and I wonder if there was like brand deals struck to help fund the game, or if they just went ahead and threw these brands in here, because if you look at something like The Day Before, that really awful game from last December, that was a situation where you saw like BPS instead of UPS, like they were retooling brands and logos that were very clearly inspired by the real world, but here you see Burger King and Adidas straight up, and it was kind of surprising. Now, I will say on the visual front, some of the CG cutscenes here are great, and it does make you yearn for what could have been. You do wonder, with a little more money, what I think this game could have accomplished, but I think the biggest problem here is time, and that's because this game feels woefully undertested. So you've already gotten to the visuals. Let's go for the gameplay now, because this is where all of my problems with the title lie. So you have a set of simple moves here. You have a basic attack. You have 2 skills that are mapped to different face buttons. You have an ultimate ability when your mana has built up enough. And all of this is done in what's called Liberation Mode. Now, Liberation Mode is where you can use all these attacks and drain your mana gradually. And when you run out of mana, you enter what's called Suppressed Mode, where you can't attack at all. You can dodge roll, but you cannot attack. You are just helpless because you are out of mana. So naturally, I think you can see where I'm going with this, that alone just sucks, that you can just be in the middle of a combo and get ripped out of it, or you're trying to dodge and get out of the way, and then you get ripped out of your magic state, or you need an ability, or you need to get that last hit, and you just can't fight. It's not a good feeling to just not be able to fight at all. And the game tries to propose a solution to that that's more skill-oriented, but it does not work. Like, literally, it does not work. And so let's break it down. So when you enter suppressed mode, you can dodge. And when you dodge with perfect timing, this little circle appears. And when the circle fills up and you release it as soon as it's full, then it's supposed to restore your MP fully. Now, you can get some MP back just by simply dodging attacks, and they'll just give you a little bit back, but this is the best way to do so, except that when you release when the circle is full, if your timing is not like on the razor's edge perfect, this will not work. And I'm not talking about in a fun, get good kind of way. Like, it just straight up doesn't work. There were times that I was holding R1, doing the dodge, absorbing, and I'd click R1 again when the circle was full, and then it would kind of work. Other times it would only work when I released it. It's inconsistent, and the tutorial doesn't really communicate to you well how the mechanic works, and the game doesn't allow you to execute it very easily. And the best comparison I could say here is, imagine if in Bayonetta, when you do the perfect dodge and you enter witch time, if that was something that just straight up barely functioned. It was just a question, right? Like, imagine fighting in Bayonetta without witch time, that perfect dodge system. You need that to succeed in that game, to avoid getting hit, to set up combos, etc., etc. It's core to the gameplay. But if that didn't work, everything else around it would fall apart. And that's exactly what happens here. Just on a fundamentals level, I think the ideas for Reynatis aren't very good when it comes to the combat. And then the way that you can get back into combat is borderline broken and non-functional and frustrating. And so you just kind of get hung out to dry for many stretches of the game. There were moments where I felt like it was working, and there were times that it just straight up wasn't. So much so that after the first 10 hours, I was like, is it me? Like, am I having a problem here? And so I would just stand there and just try to get it right. Like, let me test, hold, release, like right when the circle's full, release. Still didn't work. Okay, let me hold, release, and press again. Oh, that didn't work either. Strange. Let me hold, release, pressing. Oh, that time it worked. So maybe it is releasing and pressing, and I was the one making a mistake. And so I do that a couple of times. It suddenly is not working, and then it works when I just hold and release. So it's inconsistent, frustrating, and drove me up a wall the entire time I was playing the game because I just didn't know how to quickly get back in the fight. So what would happen is, like in this boss fight where I was playing as Marin in a 1-on-3 against Nishijima and her squad, is I just ran out of mana and ran around. I just ran around against brain dead AI, watched my MP slowly regain, and I was like, this is so broken and boring, and it could be so much better because there are times where it clicks together. In Reynatis, you can actually swap out party members mid-combat when they're with you, which is sometimes not the case, and that's where the combat's at its worst. But when you have those two party members with you and you run an MP, you can swap someone in, and then your backup party members will very slowly restore MP based on the dodges and the absorbing that you do, but also just generally over time it'll restore. And there you get a better flow for combat, at least because you can constantly attack. But the idea of a game actively ripping you out of combat, like Halo dropping the mag out of your gun, like I just couldn't even imagine that. So I just think it's a bad idea straight up, and it is not, there's no solution the game really proposes that works well. And you might think like, oh, that's just a mechanics problem in combat, but it gets worse out of combat in my opinion, which underlines one more time that this game just wasn't tested. It feels very much in an alpha state, like, oh, the ideas are there, but a lot of this needs refinement and testing, and after a year or two, we're gonna have something here. And I just feel like this game needed much more time than it was given. So when you're out of combat, you have, as I said earlier, the suppressed and liberated modes. And this applies in the real world where, so say when you're running around as Nishijima, who is the MEA agent or Magical Enforcement Agency agent, you can basically be liberated and use your magic whenever you want. You are the law after all. Meanwhile, when playing as Marin, the wizard in hiding, you'll be attacked for using your magic. So there is a wanted system of sorts in Reynatis. So when you fight, you'll actually see your trending rank on a fake social media platform start to grow. And you pretty much have to get out of there when you see that growing, because when you're at number 1, the MEA will show up, they're going to be extremely high levels, and they're going to kill you immediately. Now, there are 2 problems with this. 1, you can cancel this system out by literally just leaving the map and coming back. So it's a pointless system in that it's very easy to break. Like, the game will provide you hiding spots, I put that in quotes, so you'll just stand in this portal and all of a sudden your rank will go away and you'll be fine and not chased down by the MEA. But you can just literally leave a map, 1 loading screen, come back, and you're good. It's as if it never happened. So very easy system to break. But number 2 is that the game has random encounters where you'll be yanked into fights without much of a choice. This is fine with Nishijima, who's part of the MEA, because you'll fight and no one will blink. But when you're playing as Marin, you are frequently dragged into fights, and after the fight is done, you, by the way, have to use magic. So now you need to leave the map and then come back to continue what you were doing, because otherwise the game is going to have you get run down by the MEA again and again and again. So this becomes a bigger problem when you engage in the game's side content, because they're all pretty much combat focused, and I eventually couldn't be bothered to play them given how ridiculously broken the system is. I mean, I really stopped doing side quests after 10 hours, also because some of them are legitimately so bare bones that I have no clue why they even existed. Like, your first side quest is literally walking to a waypoint, talking to someone, and then going back and it's over. Like, it's hilariously empty and barren. It is the framework of, like, again, an alpha, like, hey, side quests work. You can talk to people and complete tasks and get XP. Cool. Like, how do we build this out further? Like, it's very much an alpha in my opinion. So yeah, the combat system, both in and out of it, just collapses completely because there was no testing. It was all ideas of like, this should all work out. Let's just implement it like this. But with a little bit of testing, you'd realize, there's a lot of problems here. And this ties into the stress and malice system. So as you fight more, your stress meter is going to raise. It's this little red bar. And this means you'll be dealing out more damage as your stress increases, but you also take more damage. And I think the stress system is fine. I never noticed intruding on the gameplay in a negative way, but it's the malice system that I do take great issue with, because a little ways into this game, you unlock what's called Wizard. There will be this kind of graffiti on the wall that you interact with, and if you collect enough stacks of this certain type of graffiti, if you will, then it'll unlock a new power for you to use. And after each fight, you're gonna get currency per character that you can spend on leveling up these skills. The problem is, some of the Wiz Art can only be acquired at oddly specific malice levels, like 79%, which you can raise or lower depending on how often you fight. However, since fights are extremely random, this feels almost impossible to control, and if it is easier to control than I'm giving it credit for, it's just not communicated to the player well at all, like I mentioned earlier with the MP Absorb system. So, to unlock new abilities, it's a combination of RNG and farming in the worst ways imaginable. Again, it just feels completely untested. This also goes down to things like the camera. The camera in this game is terrible. You'll get jammed into a wall, or even in open areas, like I'm out in the forest and I'm still getting the camera jammed into an invisible wall. It's pretty terrible in that sense as well. There's also frequent backtracking done in many of the game's main story dungeons, where you'll walk all the way forward, get to your objective, they're like, all right, we got what we want, and go back. That's because this game is so barren that it's padding it significantly. And if we're going into little minor things that I took an issue with here in the gameplay, it's the sound effects. Like, Marin has this kind of lance that when you swing around, you know, when I was a kid, I had those wrapping paper tubes that I would swing around as weapons because they made these cool kind of hollow sounds that, I don't know, got me excited as a kid. I thought it was so cool sounding. His lance sounds like that to me, and I just couldn't get out of my head. And it just sounds like the least threatening weapon ever, despite it kind of looking cool. I mean, some of the characters in this game look a little weird, not because of the visuals in the sense of like, oh, PS2 era character models, but more so like the shaders that are on the characters. Like, you'll see like running rivers on their shoulder, but they look very off compared to the rest of the character model. Like, it's very unrefined. So yeah, just a lot of weird things in this game. But there are those brief, rare moments where the gameplay and all of its systems do click together, and you're like, oh, there could be something good in here, but it feels more like a happy accident than something well designed. And so, to conclude, that does bring us to the story, which I do want to make sure you're at least somewhat aware of, in that this game is set in modern Shibuya, Tokyo, where magic has been outlawed by an organization called the MEA, or as I said earlier, the Magic Enforcement Agency, who are the law of this land. The story is told from two perspectives, one being an MEA agent and the other being a wizard on the run. So one fights for the law, one fights for freedom, and you can kind of see where this one is going. But a lot of the narrative hones in on the idea that magic is real because like people believe in it or something. At the same time, there's this drug that the MEA is very much infuriated with, particularly Nishijima. And also many people who become a wizard do so when facing death, and they become this thing called replicas, and it's a lot of word spaghetti, and I don't know, man. It's really messy. There are certain twists and turns that made me raise an eyebrow, and that's why I'm so bummed to be kind of delivering this sort of scathing review, because it's one of those things where I feel bad like doing my job. I really do, because like, it's a new director, you can see the passion, you can see the ideas. Like, as a new director myself, I get it. Like, it's so exciting, and you get all these ideas that come to mind. You can do anything, but you can't do everything, and this game tries to do everything, and because of that, it doesn't do anything really right or well, in my opinion. And it's really sad to see. It doesn't mean that it's easy for developers to step in and do this, but I hope for the director this is a really great learning lesson, because I think in the terms of passion and inspiration and creating a universe with cool ideas, that is there. And I think as a fan of FuRyu, I would like for them to continue to give opportunities to younger directors to continue to make these ideas, because unlike previous FuRyu games, Reynatis did get a little bit of buzz when they saw the Square Enix collaboration and some of the combat and animations. Like, okay, this looks like a step up in a lot of ways. But for me, as someone who's played their previous games outside of Monarch, I felt like this was a step back. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, those are my thoughts on Reynatis. I don't think it's very good at all, and I'm sorry to say that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts down below. So fire away. Will you be trying out Reynatis? There is a demo if you want to play for yourself. So let me know. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.